And our first one today will be from Jason DeRuyver of Michigan Department of Transportation. Jason is a previous chair of the Midwest Bridge Preservation Partnership and active member throughout the years, so I do want to give him a special welcome. And Jason's going to talk about NCHRP scan on bridge ends and approach slabs. So can we welcome Jason?
I'm Jason DeRuyver from the Michigan Department of Transportation. I'm the structure maintenance engineer for the state of Michigan. Chair of the Domestic Scan 1901 leading practices for detailing bridge ends and approach pavements. I'm going to just go into a little bit of the evolution of why I submitted this as a scan and how I got there. As the bridge maintenance engineer for the state, I'm routinely called up by our asset managers in the regions and the bridge engineers and other people and say, hey, I got a problem with my bridge. Can you come tell me what went wrong? And so I go out and I help them figure out what went wrong. And most of the time it comes down to detailing. I started my career in bridge design at MDOT. It's funny, a lot of times they'll say, my boss would say to me, I'll be drawing a detail and be like, we don't need a detail there. The contractor will figure that out in the field. And if you ever hear someone say that, that is really, really bad. They're not going to figure it out the way you want them to figure it out, and it's never going to work out good for you. We're going to go into what's wrong with this picture. You know, you got an expansion joint here, but where is it going to actually, how's your deck going to expand when it's barrier walls pressed up solid against on both sides? So you're actually not going to get any expansion there. So how do we end up with details like that? Well, the contractor just followed what we had on the plans. Our demolition limits in Michigan fall short of the deck fascia, and our pay item limits fall short of the deck fascia, and they just notch it in without any regard to, you know, what the deck fascia looks like, what the railing looks like. So it's kind of where we end up on stuff like that. And this one's going to be kind of hard to see, but this is a I-69 to I-94 interchange ramp, huge bridge on a curve. So it's super elevated. And another thing that's hard to see here, I thought I had zoomed in photos. Sorry about that. So the bridge was supposed to expand 4 inches, and we have this awesome idea to move all of our joints off the bridge. It's hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in here at all. So what we have here on this detail right here, it shows a nice section of the slab at the center of the bridge, and it shows a nice, you know, how this 4-inch detail joint's going to work off the bridge. But we don't cut a section like at the railing, at the actual slab overhang. So if you see over here, our slab overhang over here is coming up against return walls, and we don't detail it. The contractor doesn't know what to do, so he pours the deck overhang solid against our return walls and back walls. So again, we are designing and building a 4-inch joint off the bridge, and because the slab fascia is poured tight against the return wall, because we didn't detail it, it's not going to move. It's not going to go anywhere. You also notice that the bridge is on a super elevation, and we do these awesome things. We have these open joints on our bridge railings that go open all the way down to the deck. On the low side of the super, all the water is just going to start pouring out this 1-inch joint. This was within 1 year of the bridge being constructed. You can see right here, this is our slope paving underneath the bridge, and this is our slope paving header is already starting to settle from material being washed out from underneath it. We got a lot of joint problems, and we got a lot of detailing problems in Michigan. 2017, I was asked to present at the Scan 1703, Experiences in the Performance of Bridge Bearings and Expansion Joints Used on Highway Bridges. My eyes were kind of open to how other states were doing things and how Michigan could improve their detailing systems. This is a detail right out of our design guide for integral and semi-integral abutments. On integral abutments, the back wall is pinned to the abutment below, and on semi-integral abutments, this pin right here is omitted, and I call it the magical sliding back wall. I have yet to see in maintenance in the field a back wall sliding. I have yet to see evidence of a back wall sliding, but our designers all believe that the back wall slides and allows for the deck to expand somewhere off the bridge. So I saw this detail, and at least they took an effort at not believing their back wall was going to slide. And you can see here's the abutment, and their back wall is behind the abutment in this detail. I'm still not convinced that it's going to move, but I know it's got a better shot than sliding against our concrete abutment. When I was at this scan, I decided that I would submit for a domestic scan to actually exclusively look at the details at the ends of bridges. So that's where we're at. Leading practices for detailing bridge ends and approach pavements. I'm going to go through some of these quickly. The scan was in 2019, right before COVID hit, and we met in San Diego. We had 4 days of presentations, almost 10 hours a day presentations, so there's like 40 hours of presentations that got turned into a couple 100-page report that if you wanted to go ahead and read on the TRB website, it's there, and on the AASHTO domestic scan website as well. So what we were really looking at was, we're looking at all the different details you could possibly have at the end of a bridge, and specifically trying to zero in on the concept of a jointless bridge and how that affects our details at the ends of bridges. We were also looking at the end of bridge drainage systems, and we were looking for states that had any kind of supporting design calculations that they used to resolve. And then we were also looking at a lot of states like to do a rehabilitation where we don't replace the deck or we don't replace the bridge, but we want to get the joints off there, so we close up the joint over the pier and move it somewhere else. And we're looking for people how they had successes or failures on those types of details. So here's just a list of the scan team. We had a cross section of the United States. Here's a map of all the scan team people. The people in green were the team members, and the people in orange were the other DOTs that were invited to present on their best practices. The Midwest and the West were very well represented. We actually had a good cross-section of the entire United States. We came up with a list of pros and cons for jointless bridges. Joints are expensive, they leak, and they deteriorate our substructure and superstructure. Cons, people have been describing for jointless bridges. You get erosion around the abutments and the berms. You get approach pavement settlement, water leaking under the abutments, failure of paving supports and stuff like that. And then there's a lot of more exotic thermal restraints in the jointless bridges. A couple pictures here, cons. You get erosion around your abutments and berm areas. If you have inadequate details like Michigan does with the open joint that allows the water to drain right over the edge of the bridge and wash away any kind of material underneath your bridge. Here's a picture from Iowa. This is their old detail. If you notice, they had a pavement seat here, and they had on their back wall, so your rebar stops short in the end of your approach pavement, and you've got cover here, and your rebar stops short, and you've got for the cover here, and they only had like 1 or 2 inches of overlap. And what would happen is this would shear off, and this would shear off, and their approaches would fail because they didn't have a big enough pavement seat. So they've actually upgraded their pavement seat from, it was 8 inches to 1'3" as part of what they were looking at to resolve. Here's a sample of sometimes, so you got integral abutments on piles. Sometimes you'll get water leaking underneath the abutment, corroding the piles. So here's a summary of our initial findings. They've broken down by category. First category of findings was abutments. We looked at integral, semi-integral, slab over, retrofits, and seated L-shape abutments, just the standard abutments. Like I said, I'm going fast. There's a several 100-page report. You can just kind of scan through and index and look for what you're looking for. We also looked at berm clearances and different types of slope protection materials. Scan team members reported most often they were doing weak axis bending on their integral abutment piles. I think Tennessee was the only one that said they do strong axis bending. You want to design, so if you're counting on your abutment to flex with the bridge, you have to actually design what depth the fixity of your abutment of your piles are at. Talking about, they put jackets around them for a few feet into the ground and put like a pea stone around it so that they drain, and then the piles can flex through that. Initial findings on the joints, different joint types that were used. Louisiana they reported that they did a research project where they built a new bridge, and they put sensors just all over the place, almost on every element. And one of the sensors was underneath their approach slab. And you can see here the approach slab is sitting on their back wall here and sitting on a sleeper slab over here. They discovered that within, I think they said within 2 years or 3 years, that the sensors underneath this approach slab were registering 0 pressure. So being repeatedly loaded by semi-trucks and flexing through that kind of consolidated the soil underneath it to the point where the approach slab wasn't even in contact with the ground anymore. And when they discovered that, I think they ended up with about a 20-inch thick approach slab for their bridges. It's designed as completely unsupported. One of the other unique things we saw, I think Maine and Massachusetts do buried approach slabs. Or it might just be Maine, can't remember. Anyways, I had never seen that before. And basically, if you look here, well, what it is they have an asphalt overlay over all of their bridges and asphalt approaches. And then they have this buried approach slab, which they use as a transition zone for stiffness, geotechnical stiffness, basically. Instead of coming off of a pile supported bridge with an HMA overlay to, just earth, they have this transition zone to have a gentler settlement area. There was lots of variations we saw in the scan between the different sleeper slabs. Some states had the T sleeper slab. Some states had just a flat sleeper slab. There didn't seem to be any benefits or to which one they used. Talk about the fill underneath the approach slabs. We looked at that. A lot of states had enhanced fill zones. There seemed to be no agreement between the states on or no consistency between the states scanned as to whether or not the bridge office or the road office designed the approach slabs. Most people agreed that the bridge office should do it because we care and the road office doesn't. So at least that was the impression everyone got. In Michigan, we always have the road people design the approaches. California, they go like 300-400 feet away from the bridge with the 100% compaction on the embankment full height when they're building a brand new bridge. We saw lots of variations between what people thought would work for them. I believe Iowa has a flowable backfill detail. We looked at some states used a geosynthetic reinforced soil behind their abutments to try and make it more rigid and have less of a bump at the end of the bridge. Drainage issues. A lot of states are no longer allowed to have deck drains, so all the water has to be carried off the bridge onto the approach. Minnesota declared a game changer when they started casting their barrier walls on top of their approach panels, carry that water away from the bridge. In Michigan, if we have a return wall, we'll have a joint between the barrier wall and the approach that just washes out and causes settlement in our approaches. We're looking at moving to more of a design like Minnesota uses. This is the drainage detail from Louisiana, using a perforated pipe at the bottom of the abutment. Some notable practices we found. This again was Minnesota. They actually have very clear guidance on bridge length and skew angles to when they select integral or semi-integral abutment systems. It said the majority of the pile fixities were oriented in the weak axis. One of the things that I thought was a really good idea. Some of the states designed their wing walls without piles, and they're basically cantilevered design, like cantilevered moment concrete beams from the edges of the abutments, and that increases their flexibility in their abutments. Also, a lot of states use a bond breaker underneath their approach slabs. They'll use 2 layers of visqueen to separate that approach from the aggregate underneath so it can't freeze to the aggregate. Caltrans specifies 95% compaction full width of the embankment with 100 feet. Massachusetts DOT and South Dakota DOT said that they only perform retrofits where they take the joints off the bridge when under zero traffic. So they don't do part width on retrofits that remove joints from the bridges. There wasn't a ton of conclusions we could come with. Everyone had similar problems, and everyone thought they had good ideas. And that's pretty much what's presented in the report, that we came across a lot of good ideas. And it would be a good resource for a state that currently doesn't have a lot of good design examples and good detailing ideas. It's all in one place. It tells you what states in the report have really good examples on how to design integral abutments, how to detail things like that. I do believe I heard another NCHRP scan is coming. I think Becky Nix mentioned it yesterday about continuing this idea, it sounded like, of details at the ends of bridges and approaches, but adding some road and geotech aspects to it, I believe is what she said. It's a work in progress, I want to say. After the domestic scan, MDOT created a end of bridge details subcommittee to our statewide bridge committee. We've implemented a few changes so far. We used to only have a 6-inch pavement seat. We moved that up to 9. We used to go with a 9-inch approach slab. We've looked at the unsupported length being a little bit longer in Michigan after the Louisiana study. We've moved our approach slab up to 12 inches. We used to have one layer of visqueen that was just underneath the sleeper slab. Now it goes all the way. We have 2 layers of visqueen now that go all the way from the sleeper slab to the pavement seat. They still haven't gotten rid of the magical sliding back wall detail yet, but I'm still working on it. Any questions? I know I went through it really fast. A whole report you can look at. I think the best thing we saw, and I know Minnesota and Utah both do it, they put the approach barrier walls on the approach slab. So at least those were the only 2 states that said they did it in the scan. I think that would help us a lot. Yeah, I know we have brand new bridges that'll open up, and they'll be open for like a couple of weeks, and we'll have to close them because the approaches are already settling. We'll do that after the fact as a retrofit. We've used a vendor that's been here before. I haven't seen them this time around. They'll do the deep injection and fix all the voids and then lift it up. That's worked really, really well. I don't believe so that I saw.
A big thank you for Jason.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.